what impact does it actually have on the lives of citizens? I'm putting certain facts out. Air pollution's impact on health. Dr. Vivek Nangia, Head Pulmonology, Max Healthcare, you tell us, how serious is the impact of this across this country? If we breathe foul air, what does it do to our lifespan, to our health?
So, Rajdeep, we've known about the air pollution and its impact on our health for many, many decades now. You know, it was way back in 1950s when the most infamous London smog happened, where in just 4 days' time, there were about 12,000 deaths and a lakh of people falling sick because of the poor air quality around them. Now, as we have transitioned over the years, you know, industrial revolution then and now in India, it is still continuing, I guess, as far as urbanization is concerned. In 2015, globally, there were about 9 million deaths. That is 1 in 6 deaths were accountable only because of the poor air quality, because of the air pollution. This was times.
Repeat those figures for us, doctor. Repeat those figures.
So in 2015, globally, there were 9 million deaths. That is 1 in 6 death, which was attributed to the poor air quality. And this figure is actually 3 times higher than the total number of deaths caused by AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis all put together. So that means we have a national program for TB, AIDS, as well as for malaria in our country. But unfortunately, for poor air quality, we have no national program at all. According to the 2019 figure, there were 1.6 million deaths in India alone because of air pollution. And in 2023, they have labeled it as the second highest risk factor to human life for adults after blood pressure, high blood pressure, and in children after malnutrition. So again, for malnutrition, there's a national program, but for air quality, we have no national program yet.
So what does it do? It shortens lives, affects your lung. What does it actually do?
So, you know, overall, if you see, there are studies which have shown that overall in our country, the life expectancy has gone down by 5 years because of air pollution. In Delhi itself, Delhi NCR alone, the life expectancy has been reduced by 11.9 years. And this is a scientific study which was published in 2023. So we've known about it for years. So what happens actually is, you know, especially the PM 2.5 particle and a smaller size particle is the particle which actually goes directly into your lungs. From the lungs into the bloodstream, it triggers off an inflammatory cascade, which then travels to the various parts of the body, which include your heart, your brain, your kidneys, your joints, your pancreas. So now we are getting to see so many diseases that are getting linked to the air pollution, you know, starting from...
And this is across, and this is children, infants, as well as senior citizens, presumably, you know, all of them breathing that same air. So they're all equally affected. Am I correct?
So right from the time when the child is still in a womb, you know, in a pregnant ladies are more vulnerable to developing problems because of air pollution. A child who's not born could have poor lung functions. It could be an intrauterine growth retardation, premature births, premature deaths. Then as the child starts to grow, they start developing asthma at a very early stage. There's a study which has shown that 40% of the children from Delhi NCR had poorer lung functions or impaired lung functions as compared to children in southern India. Of course, southern India study was also not very good. I mean, the functions were poor there as well, but in Delhi, they were certainly worse.
Then, you're almost making all of us say, let's leave the national capital, find other places to live. I'm glad that you're shocking us, because the only way at times that people will realize what will force more accountability from their government is when they are alarmed by some of the numbers that you've thrown. I'm going to come back to you, Doctor, in a moment, but I want to then raise solutions. Let's be very clear. We know the problems. Let's start one solution after the other. Anumita, you've done a lot of work on mobility. The government now, only the other day said they are going to create, incentivize people to move to e-vehicles. They believe that the EV revolution is here. Do you believe it's here? Because I keep hearing mixed signals on that. And how do you incentivize people to move to EVs? Or is it just a nice statement to make?
No, so electrification and zero tailpipe emission is certainly the way to go. But what has happened so far, so as of today, Government of India has come up with several incentive programs, demand incentive programs, to give incentive to people to buy EVs. And that has really been the prime focus of building the market. But even after 5 years now, if you look at the overall electrification in the country, then it's just about 5% of the new vehicle sales. And if you are in Delhi, then it's little better. It is about 13%. But now, at this crossroad, when the EV market has begun to take off, still very nascent, but what will really be the game changer is not so much the reliance on demand incentive, because that is unaffordable for most governments. They can't keep on giving incentive year after year. But what will really stimulate the market is to have a very strong regulatory mandate, standards, and infrastructure. So, in fact, today, what is very interesting, that the personal car market, if you look at it, it has begun to electrify without incentive, because incentives, and rightly so, are given for public transport, for buses, for commercial vehicles, and for the local paratransit. So, therefore, what we are really looking for is that how do you speed up? Now, there are a lot of
Because there's
policy,
still a fraction. Correct me if I'm wrong.
very
The
small
EV
fraction.
is a small fraction. I mean,
Yes.
when I look at the numbers, vehicular emissions account for 39% of what makes Delhi choke, according to one figure.
Exactly.
And most of the, and a small fraction are EVs. So, I mean, it's going to take years for us to resolve, to tackle the problem of vehicular emissions.
But if you, Rajdeep, if you recall our experience with CNG in Delhi, when a very clear mandate and a timeline was given that within 3 years, all buses and local commercial vehicles will have to move to CNG. And that happened even when the country was not producing a
Right.
single CNG bus then. We need to recreate that kind of a strategy. That how do you drive and accelerate? And there's several levers. You can have fuel efficiency standards that will demand electrification. You require infrastructure, public charging infrastructure, and home charging facilities. And you need to support the whole other transit, the several mechanisms that are in place today. But we need the intent, we need the will to do that.
When I look
Even
at,
for
when
those,
I, when you all keep saying will, I just look at some of the numbers. A parliamentary panel found that 858 crores allocated for pollution control in the 2024-25 budget was unutilized due to delays in approval from the Union Environment Ministry. Now, when I look at those numbers, that's where the will comes from. Are you going to prioritize this issue? Pawan, every year in November, I hear farmers of Punjab being blamed. The stubble burning. Unki wajah se ho raha hai. Then when I look at the actual numbers, it shows that farm fires account for about 4% of what makes a city choke. Far higher vehicular emissions, industrial pollution, and dust. These are the top three. And yet I don't hear enough spoken about them. Do you believe we also need to recognize there needs to be a realization? Yes, you need to tackle the problem of farm fires, surely, stubble burning at the time. But is that where your attention should be when you look at solving the problems?
Rajdeep, I will say I think we need to move away from our obsession for short-term measures, right? And I think what we need right now, specifically in NCR, is a 5-year action plan with specific measurable targets sector-wise. Because I think without a target that what we are going to reduce, how we are going to reduce is known, but I think what we are going to reduce time bound is very, very, very critical. So say we are talking about 20 in next 5 years, what we are going to do in transport sector, in industry sector, in construction. I think we really have the numbers. We have the solutions. What we need is the execution plan. And this, we have to hold different departments accountable across NCR. We need a coordinated action in sync, because we simply can't say that I'll just do only industrial, I'll not do transport. I think we clearly know what needs to happen sector by sector. We need the actors to really execute it.
Can I look at an example, Vimlendu, which has been so successful, which is Beijing? It's always thrown as an example of what can be done. China got it right there. Beijing was one of the most polluted cities at the turn of the century. And eventually today they've licked the problem. But it is an authoritarian regime where you can enforce from the top. In India, that might be much more difficult. How do you drive this 5-year campaign, this clean air campaign in a country like India? Where would you start?
So I'll take from what Pawan and Anumita actually said. So you need to understand one thing. the first time that the Prime Minister's office actually intervened or made a statement with regard to air pollution was with regard to private vehicles and EVs. We need to understand one thing very, very clear. Private vehicles of one kind can't be replaced by private vehicles of another kind. If we really need to solve this problem, we will have to look at public transport. And that's where the
So
problem
what did
is that we
China
are
do?
actually...
What did China do? What did
So
tell our
China
viewers?
did
What did
exactly
China do?
that, Rajdeep. China did exactly that in terms of Beijing. First of all, one of the things that they did, it actually strengthened its public transport infrastructure in its regime. Second thing that it did, which I mentioned earlier, the coal thermal power plants were actually moved out of the immediate periphery of Beijing. Third thing that it did, that the emissions, of course, we are talking about 7 to 8% or perhaps 10% emissions of Delhi NCR that happens from industries in that sense. They moved those industries outside the immediate periphery or so-called air catchment or airshed in that sense. So we need to look at that those harsh decisions, which of course came at the cost of the economy, were taken. So public transport, your thermal power plants, your emission, of course, construction and demolition dust and roadside dust wasn't such a big thing in this case study of Beijing that we're talking about. And also, one of the things that Beijing did very, very importantly, and that's the fundamental of air quality governance, is that it did not really get obsessed with symptoms. It actually went to the source. So, what we are actually looking at last 10 years of India's governance, or 10 or 15 or perhaps 20 years of air quality governance in India, we only look at symptoms and we
Give me
only
an
look
example.
at it from a
Give me an
periodic
example.
October to January. Sorry?
Give me an example. When you say we look at symptoms
So, for example, one of the things that
then
we
you
are
go
actually
to the
doing right
source.
now, one of the things that we are actually doing in bad governance of air quality is data manipulation. So right now, for example, you are not wearing a mask. Perhaps you are in the studio. I'm not wearing a mask because I'm in Varanasi, where air quality is 357. In Noida, your air quality is 350. But we have normalized this 350 air quality, where countries like Thailand actually almost shut down at AQI of 200. So it's Changa C at 350. It's okay at 450. And if your private monitor is telling you 1200, it's still fine. So that's the problem that we're talking about. So now, in terms of where are we looking at only symptoms? Sprinkling water or cloud seeding. Imagine for 16 days, the headline management in terms of air quality governance was with regard to cloud seeding, where operation was successful, the patient died. In the sense, cloud seeding was successful, but rain didn't really happen. And there's no evidence from anywhere in the world where cloud seeding has actually worked. And imagine 1,500 square kilometer area that we actually have of Delhi NCR, where 1 square kilometer costs almost 50 lakhs. How many such cloud seeding events? And the environment minister said he wants it every 2 days because Delhi's air quality is very poor, almost 200 days, which is every alternate day. So,
And when I interviewed him, he was almost celebrating when it went from very poor to poor, which clearly shows, as you said,
exactly.
the chalta hai.
So, and then imagine,
comes.
I was there, Rajdeep, yesterday at Anand Vihar, where your air, and which is one of the most polluted areas, where the air quality monitor is under a tree. 20 meters from there is a voodoo machine endorsed by the Supreme Court called Smog Tower, and water sprinkled all through. And then the air quality is okay. And CAQM, so-called body, and the only quasi judicial body. See, I was coughing in Gurgaon and coughing in Varanasi as well.
Okay, it's interesting. You've chosen to be in Varanasi, which is the Prime Minister's constituency, and you're coughing there.